Hello, my friends. My name is Aaron Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to help with some context in the war in Ukraine. In my live stream yesterday, somebody asked if I heard of Scott Ritter's 40 to 1 ratio that the Ukrainians were losing 40 soldiers for every one Russian soldier. And I laughed and they said, no, Scott Ritter really said that. And I, okay. So somebody sent me the link and we're going to hear him say this. And then we're going to look at the math and see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So let's start by listening to what Scott Ritter has to say. Here we go.
They are dying. So Scott, I want to get you back in here just to, if you could comment on what you've made of how, especially Western intelligence, you mentioned David Cameron literally talking to Donald Trump to try to get him to change his stance. I mean, a lot of this seems desperate, but at the same time, it's being portrayed as this kind of I don't know, PR ploy for making maybe the conflict look better or look like it's going better than it actually is going.
Well, let me put it this way. Russia today is suffering the lowest casualty rate that it has since this war began. They are so overwhelmingly dominating the front lines right now. You're literally at the point where, it's not 10 to 1. We're talking 20 to 1, 30 to 1, 40 to 1.
Okay, so he just said it, and we're going to listen to more after they said that, but this doesn't seem like it makes sense. When we look at the Russian versus Ukrainian losses, we don't know what the Ukrainian losses are, but we can look at what the Ukrainians are saying about Russian losses. Now, he will not believe these facts, but I'm looking at north of 1,000 for the last few weeks. So that would mean that the Ukrainians have to be losing 10,000 to 40,000 a week. That doesn't sound quite right. So let's go back and, by the way, put it in context. Back in April 23rd, Sergei Shoigu said that Ukrainian military losses since February 2022 have reached 500,000 or almost 500,000. And certainly it has passed that since April 23rd, according to their kind of calculations. But let's hear a little bit more and then we'll go and look at the math.
So for every one dead Russian, you're going 20, 30, 40 dead Ukrainians. It's just totally out of balance. The Russians are accumulating military power every day, massive quantities of troops and equipment. British intelligence from the very beginning, they're first of all, let's understand this. If it's really, really good intelligence, you don't release it to the public.
Okay, and there might be some fair point about that, but if you're trying to provide stats to the public of what losses are of your enemy, then that's an ongoing thing, like what the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense does regularly. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be true, but I get his point, and it's a fair point, but I don't think it holds here.
The fact that British intelligence, first of all, normally speaking, why is intelligence getting in the PR game? It's not their job. Their job is to inform decision makers. Okay, so the way it's
and that's not necessarily so because there could be some overlap. But okay, let's say
good work is that British intelligence briefs, the decision makers, the customers. Then the customers sit there and take that intelligence, and the customer goes forward and starts saying, we believe that the Russians are suffering very high casualties, da 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 da. But when British intelligence coming out, you automatically know that they're in the information warfare game, and their job is to spin. But who are they spinning? I mean, I would imagine that the Russian high command has a good idea of what their casualty figures are and how many people they're losing on the battle. They don't need British intelligence to tell them what they're doing. Putin doesn't need to hear it from British intelligence. The Russian people certainly don't believe British. So British intelligence is impressing whom?
So that's really interesting. The Russian people don't believe British intelligence. I wonder if the Russian people really do, in their heart of hearts, believe the Russian intelligence or the Russian statements, like when Sergei Shoigu says something along these lines, that Ukrainian losses have reached 500,000. But let's just say 500,000 and roughly 500,000 would at least be parity. And I don't think that's where it is, but at least be parity. But they 10 to 1 or 20 to 1 or 40 to 1, that sounds absolutely ridiculous. Now, the U.S. estimate, if you extrapolate out, wouldn't be that far. The British estimate is somewhere very close to this. The French estimate was actually more than this. So it's a really weird thing to watch what's going on. Okay, let's do some math. So 500,000 minus 49,290. I did this morning, and so I still have this here. And that is simply looking at this and 49,290 and looking at how long is it going to take. It's not going to take very long. It'll take about a week to get from where we are to, it's going to be by Saturday, we're going to actually see the Russians hit 500,000. Now let's look at this. 500,000. If the Ukrainians are losing 10 to 1. That means the Russians only suffered 50,000 casualties. 10 times 50,000 is 500,000. They only lost 50,000 casualties during the war. Does that make sense? Or let's go a little bit further. He said 10, 20, 40,000. Here's 20 times 25 is 500,000, right? So 20 times 25. 25,000 casualties? Really? They only lost 25,000? Or 40 to 1? You would only lose 12,500? I mean, they lost 12,500 in the first few months. It's unbelievable that he would make this kind of claim. And he's been saying week after week, it's over for Ukraine. They're doomed. They're just about to, like, 800 days later, you're still singing the same song, and that hasn't changed. Now, that doesn't mean that there hasn't been some bloodiness on either side, but they're still hanging in there, and this 40 to 1 is improbable. Now, in fairness, I want to say this. He's not necessarily making the argument that it's, or at least I didn't hear him make the argument that it's 40 to 1 throughout the entire war. He's talking about right now, that's what's going on. But still, the percentages seem wildly unfair. Yes, they're low on artillery, but they're getting their artillery. And yes, they had to operate differently, but they were also the defenders, not the attackers. So 40 to 1 seems crazy improbable. Just a couple more minutes and then we'll be done.
A Western audience. For what purpose? Russia doesn't care anything about the West anymore. Nothing. They don't care what we think. They don't care what we eat. They don't care what we dress like. They don't care what we smell like. They just don't care. I mean, they'd like to be friends with us, but they don't.
Well, they also don't care about telling the truth or communicating the truth. They're willing to make up all kinds of things, and I've proven that again and again and again throughout my videos. So they don't care about sending men into wood chippers and massive slaughters of meat wave assaults because they fight with what they have, and what they have is people. And so that's another reason that the numbers of 40 to 1 or whatever just seem terribly improbable. It could almost work in reverse. I'm not suggesting that at all, but it could almost work these high numbers of, let's say, 10 to 1. I'm not going to go to 20 or 30 to 1, 40 to 1, but let's say 10. If you're sending a meat wave assault against a defended area, and that could potentially be an issue, but I just can't see this. Just a little bit more.
Wake up in the morning and go, gosh, what is the West thinking about us today? I mean, could you imagine that somebody waking up in Vladivostok tomorrow going, wonder what British intelligence is saying about how many casualties we suffer today. They don't care because it doesn't matter. So I don't know,
But it's going to matter. The more that oil refineries are hit within Russia, the more that military targets are hit within Russia, the more that the war comes home to Russia. Okay, at any rate, that's all that I wanted to show. Scott Ritter actually saying this. I didn't believe it when I first heard it. I thought, like, that's improbable. How could he even say anything like that? And again, he didn't say it throughout the whole war, but just recently 40 to 1. But the odds, the math just doesn't make sense. And okay, that's all that I have here. Tell me what you think about what you just saw. You heard it from the horse's mouth. 3 minutes worth of him talking about this directly and saying, well, it's all PR. It's just smoke and mirrors. The real numbers are 10 or 20 or 40 to 1 Ukrainian losses, and I can't see it. But if you see something that I'm not seeing, put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.